3 years have passed since AUKUS was first announced. China continues to argue that the Australia-UK-US Security Pact raises unnecessary regional tensions. Meanwhile, the alliance is looking at Phase 2 with Japan's potential role and expansion to include other partners. Now, with a related upcoming meeting set for this Wednesday, we must review the nature of AUKUS and the expectations surrounding the Korea-Australia 2+2 meeting. So for further insights, we now connect with Professor Kim Byung-joo at the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
And thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Maybe we need to begin with the upcoming meeting. So this Wednesday, we will see the Korea-Australia 2+2 meeting take place. What is the significance of this very meeting?
This 2+2 meeting of foreign ministers and also defense ministers, this actually symbolizes a very close cooperative relationship between the countries involved. And only we see around the world this kind of 2+2 meeting taking place only among those kind of allies and countries. And when we consider it's a foreign affairs and defense ministers meeting, it's basically covering overall security issues of the common concern between the two countries. And when I say it's not a common thing that we see, or what I mean by that is Korea in recent years, we may remember we have this kind of meetings with the United States, Japan, UK, and Australia. I've been looking through the records, but in recent years, only those three countries, US, Japan, UK, and Australia, those are the countries that Korea has had these 2+2 meetings. But in terms of regular meeting taking place, United States and Australia are the only two countries. With Japan and UK, it has been kind of occasional, but not regular, and the schedule. And so Australia comes in right after the United States as the second country that Korea has had this kind of regular meetings of 2+2. It first began more than 10 years ago, 2013. It was the first time. And since then, it's been taking place almost every 2 years. And the last one was 2021. And since then, because of Australia's own domestic situation, it has been postponed just a little bit. And now the sixth meeting is taking place the day after tomorrow in Australia. And we want to be reminded when we say Australia is the second country, only after the United States, we're having this kind of, interaction at a very high level. What we may want to know where Australia is situated in terms of, it kind of signifies its importance already by saying that. But in terms of other measures, Korea has these different names for like a ranking importance of allies. And I think we've done this before, but maybe it might be interesting to go over it just briefly here.
Sure.
The United States tops the list among the allies, no surprise here. And the name for the alliance for the United States is a Global Comprehensive Strategic Alliance. That's the name attached to Korea's relationship with the United States. And you may not guess the second country that comes in, that's UK. UK comes in with the name Global Strategic Partnership. And you can call Australia third one or fourth, depending on how you name it. But there is a countries that are called under the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. They include Australia, Canada, and Vietnam, and Denmark. Interesting thing is, interestingly, a few years ago, Denmark came in on top of the other three with the interesting name of Comprehensive Green Strategic Partnership. So with the name green attached, kind of like you can say Denmark is number 3, but then again, they're all comprehensive strategic partnerships. So US, UK, Denmark, Australia, Canada, Vietnam, those are the countries that tops the list of diplomatic importance for Korea. But once again, Australia is indeed the country that we are having this regular foreign affairs and defense ministerial talks here. So that's an important reminder for all of us.
So is it safe for me to assume that just a few years back, maybe it was the green initiatives that were prioritized and circumstances have maybe changed a little bit, so we're using different measurements to put Australia ahead of Denmark?
Reason for Australia to do more, I guess, on the green side. But yeah, Denmark has, we're not talking about Denmark today, but Denmark has occupied a very interesting position in foreign relations. And even the time when I was working at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat, there were incidents and cases where we had to closely work with that country. So anyway, it's an outlier, but Australia, very important.
Okay, with many mutual interests, it turns out. Maybe it's a good time as any for us to remind our listeners about the nature of AUKUS. We need to remind our listeners maybe of its identity, its significance.
Right. AUKUS is the key topic that will be, everybody's expecting will be discussed at this 2+2 meeting on Wednesday. And AUKUS stands for Australia, UK, and the United States. If you combine those names, the name comes AUKUS. And what are those three countries doing together? The first and foremost is providing Australia with the nuclear-powered submarine technology. Some people will say, well, why nuclear-powered submarine technology? Well, the thing is, back in September 2021, announcement was made that this U.S.-UK joint partnership will replace Australia's effort with France in terms of getting their nuclear-powered submarine technology. There was something going on between France and Australia for quite some time. Australia being a naval power, a country located in the Pacific Ocean, they need, as an ultimate deterrence, they need this kind of technology to defend themselves. And they were working with France. And all of a suddenly back in 2021, UK and United States came in to replace France as a partner. And of course, France got really angry about that. There was very interesting diplomatic stories of breakout and everything. But that's when AUKUS was set up, the three-country alliance, in terms of making Australia stronger in terms of its self-defense capability against, it was not spelled out, but obviously against China's threat and so on in the Pacific. So that was the key idea of AUKUS. And now what we are talking about is, that's called Pillar 1, submarine, the nuclear-powered submarine technology being transferred to Australia. That's a Pillar 1 of AUKUS operation. But now they're increasingly talking about Pillar 2 cooperation. That's an area where they include a lot more areas, sectors of cooperation, such as computer and cyberspace technology, hypersonic and counter-hypersonic missile technology, radar capabilities, and all this different kind of quantum, computing, all those things. Three powers working together. And that's not the end of the story. On top of three powers working together on these issues, they want to invite other countries and expand AUKUS. And Japan tops the list as a country. It's been talked about. And then New Zealand, it has been talked about for a while, but it kind of backed out. Korea is the next one to talk about. That's why this is important. And they're talking about AUKUS at Korea, Australia 2+2, and then Korea may be invited into AUKUS. That's why many eyes are watching from Seoul.
Just to remind our listeners, we mentioned it briefly in our headlines, but earlier this month, the defense chiefs of the three AUKUS nations issued a statement noting their consideration of Japan, as you mentioned, as a partner. New Zealand, Canada also shortlisted, South Korea being considered. So maybe we need to talk about that invitation for Korea. What do we see in terms of recent moves by the U.S. and others to invite Korea into AUKUS?
It's only recently that the name Korea is being mentioned specifically for AUKUS expansion. But now, as you point out, Korea is mentioned together with Canada and New Zealand. As I mentioned, Japan has been the name that's been talked about the whole time, but now Korea is being mentioned. And from strategic perspective, it makes good sense. Any of those people who are creating AUKUS architecture altogether, adding Korea makes sense because when they're talking about expansion of AUKUS, they are talking about countries with the following capabilities: country with money, country with the industry, country with the technology, and also, capability to protect confidential information that's being shared with allies. And of course, Korea comes on the top of this list among the possible, countries to work with, or the existing 3 members of AUKUS. So that's why they're talking about Korea, even before Canada and before New Zealand. And so that's the context Korea is being talked about. And people with real names being mentioned, U.S. top government officials talking about Korea as a possible candidate to be invited to AUKUS. That's the latest status that we see in terms of Korea's relationship with the AUKUS issue here.
AUKUS by design is to counter Beijing's assertiveness. So I can imagine China really not being welcoming of such an idea. And this is while South Korean government tries to maybe make amends with Beijing.
Right. There's no question about it. And China feels kind of threatened by this. Of course, AUKUS is not the only one. We know, for example, Quad. I think Quad existed even before AUKUS. And Quad is the cooperation mechanism involving 4 countries, the United States, Australia, Japan, and India. And we have all these names, Quad, AUKUS, and Five Eyes, and nowadays Korea, Japan, US, and then Korea, Japan, Philippines. So that's why, remember, we talked about the lattice style of US strategy of layers and layers of different mechanisms that's designed to counter China. And so as a part of this design, China is resisting quite strongly against the idea of AUKUS here. And they came out, some of the government officials came out recently expressing serious concerns indeed. And Korea is not being mentioned at this time. Korea has begun to be mentioned by the AUKUS members. So Korea has not been mentioned by China yet, but China in recent days and weeks and months, they've been talking about Japan, criticizing Japan's possibility of joining AUKUS. And the usual argument, the invocation of history. Japan has to face the history and what they did in the past, and joining this kind of Pacific alliance reminds us of the historical baggage that Japan is carrying, and Japan is not in a position to do this kind of stuff. That's usual Chinese line. Interesting thing is, in addition to China's reaction to this, North Korea joined as well. North Korea has come out criticizing the idea of expansion of AUKUS, and we're talking about Japan. And they also mentioned Korea, Canada, New Zealand as well. The countries kind of venturing into this kind of dangerous games and so on.
And they use really strong words to describe it. Touch and go nuclear minefield, I think, are the words that were used.
Exactly. And strong words is a trademark for right?
Very, very true.
Right. So if they don't use strong words, there will be something to note. But anyway, they came out quite strongly. And this indicates the increasingly, emerging or fast emerging indication that the Cold War II is emerging. And then the line is being drawn between China, Russia, North Korea on one side, and the rest of the other countries on the other side. So that's one of the aspects we see here in this case.
And the problem for South Korea is that we're always in a delicate position. We can't just draw a line and say we're on this side completely, depending on the subject at hand, economic, I guess, relationships, diplomatic and otherwise, militarily. And hopes are actually pretty high that Seoul and Beijing will try to mend soured relations through series of high-level talks in the coming weeks. So I guess the big question today, and this is probably the loaded question that requires most of your expertise, Professor Kim. How do we hold our own ground facing these complexities in the region and hearing varying countries exchange of rhetoric? What are some key principles Korea should keep in mind?
Yeah, this is an important question. And we, I guess, frequently deal with this question again and again in this program as well. And that's all because of different factors, including, for example, in Korean domestic politics during the general election campaign, there were cases where voices were raised arguing that we should get along with China. We have to be nice to China and we have to remain friends with China. Well, there's no question about it. South Korea has to get along with China, and South Korea has to pursue different channels of cooperation working together with China. There's no question about it. But that, especially on the economic side and so on, and that needs to be separated from the national security concerns here, because increasingly we see so-called security dilemma situation. Countries are trying to increase their self-defense capability or capability to defend themselves, and that's basic intentions for all countries involved. Some people say even North Korea, even China, and South Korea, Japan, we are all trying to defend ourselves. That's all we are doing. Interesting fact is, by doing so, however, it increases threat perceptions on the other side. Whatever the intention is, and intention could be assumed as something benign, but the result of it is threat to other countries. So some people argue, well, so we shouldn't do things that's threatening to China. Some people say that. And the thing is, however, I've been teaching international relations for decades here, and we know cases. The thing is, when we deal with countries of democracies, sometimes it works. Goodwill, what the experts call diffuse reciprocity. I do something good for you, and then you do something good for me later on. That kind of relationship works. Data and evidence shows among the countries of democracies. But countries with authoritarian systems, they operate based on very different kind of assumptions. It's called realism. And for them, values, ethics, morality, they take fully backseat. And for them, what matters is the force and power and so on. And the history and cases continue to show that's the case, and that's the principle based upon which countries of authoritarian political systems operate internationally. So therefore, sadly to say, even if we assume that China and North Korea are just trying to protect themselves, as they increase their capability, military capability, we have to respond in kind in order to protect ourselves. And for us, what we can do is strengthening the cooperative working relationship with the countries that share similar values with us. That's United States, Japan, Australia, and these countries on this side. So whether we like it or not, the history and theories have taught us, and data have taught us, and that's the way to go. Rather than, like being nice to the countries of authoritarian politics and hoping that they will be nice back to us. That has not worked in the past. So we have clear evidence. So sad to say, but that's what I have to emphasize once again.
All right. History, we have enough data there, so maybe we need to rely on a little bit more to make these educated guesses as we go forward. Thank you so much, Professor Kim, as always, for an insightful conversation.
Thank you, as always.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.